The Swiss Alps enchant everyone. Snow-capped mountains, wooden chalets, clear skies, flowers on balconies. Everything seems perfect. But behind this postcard landscape lies a little-known daily life. Harsh winters, isolation, hard work, and a routine that requires constant collaboration. There are villages that go months without seeing the sun. There are places where cars don't even drive. Have you ever wondered what it's like to live in a place like this, where the nearest supermarket can be hours away? Today, Bello Mundo goes far beyond the landscape. We're going behind the scenes of life in the Swiss Alps, and what you discover may change the way you see that seemingly perfect setting. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Switzerland is a dream destination for many people. It lies right in the heart of Europe and seems to exist in another time, another world, another logic. A country where everything works, where things are expensive but also impeccable. We've talked about it here before. In fact, we recently posted a video about the country's most interesting facts. And when it comes to curiosities, Switzerland knows how to surprise. Did you know, for example, that it is still legal to eat dog and cat meat there? What if I told you that there is a substance considered illegal in almost every country in the world that is distributed with a prescription there? But that's all for another video. Because today our destination is not banks, shiny cities, or international agreements. Today we're going higher, literally. The Alps cover more than half of Switzerland. There are more than 20,000 square kilometers of mountain ranges, snow-capped peaks, glacial lakes, narrow trails, and deep valleys where just over 1 million people live. Most of them are scattered in small villages with less than 1,000 inhabitants, almost always surrounded by steep slopes, forests, and lots of mountains. These villages are concentrated in regions called cantons, which are like autonomous provinces, such as Valais, Graubünden, Bern, and Uri. And that's where some of Europe's most iconic mountains are located, like the Dufourspitze, which is the highest point in Switzerland at over 15,000 feet, or the Matterhorn, with its triangular peak so perfect that it looks like it was drawn by hand. The climate changes considerably with altitude. In the lower villages, winters are cold but bearable. In the higher parts, however, the cold is serious. Temperatures can drop to -15 or -20 degrees Celsius. Snow blocks roads, freezes pipes, and becomes part of everyday life for months on end. In summer, the scenery is transformed. The fields bloom, the pastures come back to life, and the mountains open up to hikers and tourists from all over the world. But this is not a place to pass through. There are people who were born there, grew up there, and live there. People who have learned to respect the terrain, the cold, the distance, and the silence. And it is about this life that we are going to talk now. Number 2. History. Long before becoming a ski resort and Instagram trail, the Alps were a place of survival. Human occupation began there thousands of years ago, but it was not always continuous. At the time of the Roman Empire, there were already important routes crossing the region. One of the best known was the Great St. Bernard Pass, one of the main routes through the mountains, connecting northern Italy to Central Europe. Today it is famous because of the Saint Bernard dog, which was used by monks to rescue travelers in the snow. But at that time, the Romans avoided living at high altitudes. They preferred to settle in the lower valleys, where the climate was milder and access easier. Those who braved the heights were the Celtic and Rhaetian peoples, who occupied isolated valleys and lived by hunting and farming. Later, in the Middle Ages, peasants began to clear inhospitable slopes in search of land, pasture, and freedom. It was there, amid these valleys, that Switzerland was born. In the 14th century, 3 mountain communities, Uri, Swiss and Unterwalden, united to resist the feudal lords. The Swiss Confederation was born, a country founded by villages trying to survive on their own. This spirit of independence became a national symbol. In some cantons, even today, political decisions are made outdoors. This is the case of the Landsgemeinde, a traditional assembly in which everyone votes by raising their hands in the square. It seems like something from the past, but it still happens. For centuries, life was based on subsistence agriculture. Each village had its own irrigation system, such as the Bisses in the canton of Valais. They raised cows, made cheese, and shared pastures. They were closed communities with their own accents, rules, and legends. It was not until the 19th century that the outside world began to look at the Alps with enchantment. The European Romantic movement brought tourists, mountaineers, and curious visitors to the most remote villages, the Alps that are our destination. Number 3. Clothing and adaptation to the cold. You know that saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. Well, that's true. Anyone who sees the green Swiss Alps in summer photos, with cows grazing and flower-filled trails, can't imagine what it's like to live there in the middle of winter. Those charming little houses, surrounded by perfect mountains, face sub-zero temperatures for months. And when the snow covers everything, there is no fairy tale landscape that can cope with the real cold. That's why the way people dress in alpine villages wasn't born out of a cute tradition. It was born out of necessity. It has always been a matter of survival. Traditional clothing follows a layered pattern. First, woolen underwear, then a thick shirt, a reinforced vest, a woolen or leather coat, and over everything, a windproof and waterproof cape. On the feet, heavy boots with sturdy soles, made to last and withstand mud, snow, and ice. Nowadays, clothing has changed and adapted, but the logic remains the same. Everyone wears thermal clothing, padded jackets, hats, scarves, gloves, and waterproof boots. In some villages, everyday clothing is practically the same as ski wear, and adaptation also happens indoors. Number 4. How houses work. To withstand the alpine winter, it is not enough to wear wool. The house also has to be ready for battle, and there every detail has been designed to withstand months of cold, wind, and snow. What looks like charming decoration is actually a survival strategy. The walls are thick, made of wood or stone, with reinforced thermal insulation. The windows are small and double-glazed to keep the heat in and the wind out. The roofs are sloped so that snow slides off and does not accumulate. And the underground basement is used both to store firewood and to keep food safe from freezing. In older houses, kachelofen is still used, a tiled stove that heats the room slowly and continuously. Once heated, it radiates heat for hours. In times of expensive energy, this still makes a big difference. Water comes from systems protected from freezing, and it is not uncommon to find villages with public fountains in the center that work all year round. Inside the house, everything is designed for economy. Showers are quick, rooms are heated selectively, and the air needs to circulate every day, even in the cold, to prevent mold. But if there is one thing as important as the right coat and a well-insulated house, it is the community. Because in the Alps, one swallow does not make a summer, or, in this case, survive the winter. Number 5. Daily life and community life. Daily life in alpine villages may seem simple, but it is far from monotonous. Waking up before sunrise is routine, especially for those who work with livestock. There are places where the day begins with the ringing of cowbells and ends with the ringing of church bells. Early in the morning, families are already up, feeding the animals, milking fresh milk, and putting wood on the stove. Mutual help is the law. Today you help your neighbor fix the barn. Tomorrow he helps you stack wood or gather hay before the first snow. When the snow falls, everyone gets together to clear the roads, protect the roofs, or help those who live alone. There are even villages where no one locks their doors, because everyone knows each other. Everyone looks out for each other. Children grow up at a pace that hardly exists in cities anymore. In the summer, they run through the flower-filled fields. In winter, they go sledding and play in the snow. In many places, schools are small and multi-grade, with a single teacher teaching children of different ages. In others, students take a bus down the mountain every day to the school in the valley. This sense of community is also evident in the way residents speak, celebrate, and relate to the world. Number 6. Language, religion, customs. Today, more than 2 million people live in the Swiss Alps. They live in small villages spread across 4 main cantons: Valais, Bern, Graubünden, and Uri. And although the scenery is similar, the way of life varies greatly from one valley to another. Starting with the language. Switzerland has 4 official languages, and in the Alps this becomes a veritable mosaic. In parts of Valais and Bern, for example, the language spoken is a dialect of Swiss German, so local that residents of neighboring villages sometimes have difficulty understanding each other. In the canton of Fribourg, French is dominant. In Ticino, Italian sets the tone for conversations. In Graubünden, there is something even rarer, Romansch, a language inherited from Latin. It is spoken by less than 0.5% of the population. These linguistic differences shape not only the sound of the streets, but also the traditions of each community. Religion, for example, varies from region to region. In Catholic cantons, churches are at the center of the village, with frequent masses and festivals dedicated to patron saints. In Protestant regions, the tone is more sober but no less present. Worship services bring families together in discreet celebrations marked by choral singing and ancient rituals. The religious calendar is respected in every corner. Christmas, Easter, and the village's patron saint's day mobilize the entire community. And all of this is reflected in very unique customs, such as processions, community holidays, and seasonal rituals. But if there is a time when this identity really comes to life, it is during traditional festivals. This is when the Alps cease to be just a beautiful landscape and become a cultural spectacle. Number 7. Alpine traditions and local culture. While everyday life has its charm, it is in their traditions and festivals that Alpine villages truly reveal their character. Every corner of the Alps has its own rituals, many of which date back to the Middle Ages or even earlier. One of the most eagerly awaited events takes place at the end of summer, when the cows return from the high pastures. It is the famous Alpabzug in German or Des Alpes in French. It takes place between September and October and turns into a real parade. The animals descend the mountain decorated with flowers and shiny bells. The shepherds wear traditional clothing. The locals set up stalls selling cheese and mulled wine, and music fills the streets. It is the symbolic end of summer, celebrated with pride by those who make their living from cattle. In some regions of Valais, there is even a cow tournament. These are called queen fights between cows of the Herens breed. Nothing bloody. It's just a contest of strength where 2 cows face each other until one gives up. The winner becomes a local celebrity and even wins a crown. And no one finds it strange, because there, animals are part of life in a way that goes beyond livestock farming. But it's not just the shepherds who celebrate. In January, in the canton of Graubünden, one of the most curious rituals of the year takes place. Shalanda Mars. Young people and children run through the streets with bells hanging from their belts, cracking whips and making noise to scare away winter and welcome spring. This festival became known worldwide because of the cartoon Heidi, based on the book by Swiss writer Johanna Spiri. The story of the orphan girl who goes to live with her grandfather in the Alps has enchanted generations, and Chalandamars appears in one of the episodes as a symbol of local culture. Carnival also has its own unique versions, with traditional costumes and characters that poke fun at village life. In spring and summer, there are harvest festivals, wine festivals, outdoor dancing, and folk music concerts. In fact, music is always present. At larger festivals, it is common to see performances of the alphorn, those giant horns used in the past by shepherds to communicate over long distances. And if there is music, there has to be dancing, right? Traditional dances are also still alive, such as the Schuhplattler, with hand and foot tapping, and dances with accordion, clarinet, and double bass bands. And of course, the food also reflects all this energy and cultural diversity, because food is also culture. Number 8. Gastronomy. If there's one thing that's not lacking in alpine villages, it's food with history. The cuisine there is simple but made to sustain you, and each dish carries a piece of the landscape. The day starts early with a hearty breakfast. No rush, no processed cereal. In many homes, fresh milk from the cow is still boiled in the morning. The smell of rustic bread in the oven, black coffee on the wood stove, and homemade butter is almost a ritual. At lunchtime, ingredients straight from the fields take center stage. A typical dish is barley soup, hot and thick, perfect for fighting the cold. But no symbol is stronger than melted cheese. There is raclette, which is served with potatoes and pickles. In fact, in the Valais region, no party is complete without it. It is served at will, accompanied by fendant white wine, produced right there in the vineyards of the lower valleys. Yes, there is Alpine wine, and it is well respected. In Appenzell, smoked sausages and dried fruitcakes reign supreme at parties. And in the canton of Uri, community gatherings usually feature Elple Magronen, a kind of macaroni gratin with cheese, potatoes, and onions that is almost like a hug for the stomach. And since we're talking about smoked meat, it's worth mentioning Bühner Fleisch, a cured and dried beef, typical of Graubünden. It is cut thin, almost transparent, and goes well with dark bread and strong cheeses. Because yes, cheeses are another local pride. Each valley has its own: Gruyère, Emmental, Appenzeller, Tilsiter, Raclette, du Valais. Many are still handmade in the Alpages, the high pastures where cows spend the summer. And the most curious thing is how these products emerged from tiny villages and gained worldwide fame. Gruyère cheese, for example, is named after a village with just over 2,000 inhabitants in the canton of Fribourg, in the western part of the Swiss Alps. The same goes for Toblerone chocolate, which was born in Bern, the capital of Switzerland, and whose triangular shape was inspired by the silhouette of the Matterhorn, one of the most iconic peaks in the Alps, on the border with Italy. And speaking of chocolate, it also has a guaranteed place on alpine tables, whether in steaming fondues to warm up winter nights or in bars distributed to children at holiday parties. It is part of the celebration. But the Alps are not just about tradition and food, because, let's face it, to keep the table full and the party lively, you need more than cheese and friendliness. You need money in your pocket. And then the question that begs to be asked arises: how do these small communities manage to be sustainable today? You'll see the answer in a moment. But if you've made it this far, it's because you're enjoying the video. So don't forget to like it to support the channel. That way, Bello Mundo will continue to take you to the most incredible places on the planet, including those that no one has shown you before. Number 9. Economy and tourism. The economic base of alpine villages has always been agriculture and livestock, raising cows, producing cheese, tending pastures. However, this alone is no longer enough to sustain the communities. Most residents today have multiple jobs. In the morning, they milk cows. In the afternoon, they work on a cable car, welcome tourists into their homes, or sell homemade jam in the village center. Tourism has become the main source of income. In 2024 alone, Switzerland recorded more than 40 million overnight stays in hotels, and a good chunk of that came from the alpine regions. Places like Zermatt, Grindelwald, and St. Moritz receive 4 times more tourists in winter than the number of residents. On busy days, it is common to hear 5 different languages spoken at the corner bakery, and it's not just the famous villages. In smaller villages, tourism has arrived more discreetly. Hikers in the summer, skiers in the winter, local produce markets, guided tours by older residents, improvised museums in old churches. Every franc spent by a visitor helps keep the shops, schools, and village infrastructure alive. The economy also goes beyond tourism. There is high-altitude wine production, handicrafts, cheeses with a seal of origin, and even hydroelectric plants taking advantage of the mountain rivers. Today, what we see is a creative economy adapted to the new reality. But all this economic activity also brings to the fore major concerns and challenges. Number 10. Challenges. The truth is that keeping a community alive in the Alps is no easy task. Behind the perfect landscapes, there are a number of challenges that threaten the future of these villages. The first of these is the pressure of urbanization. It seems strange to talk about urbanization in such small places, but it does happen. Even without population growth, the number of houses has increased in recent decades. These are larger chalets, second homes for wealthy people who only show up at Christmas and in the summer. This crowds the villages, inflates real estate prices, and empties community life during the off-season. Another challenge is environmental. The mountains are suffering from global warming. The snow season has shortened, glaciers are melting, and low-altitude ski resorts are already facing a lack of snow. The solution has been to use artificial snow, but this consumes water and energy and does not solve the long-term problem. And there's more. Alpine soil is fragile. Any poorly constructed building or removal of vegetation can cause landslides. In 2017, the village of Bondo saw part of its hillside collapse after the thawing of permafrost, soil that should have been frozen for millennia. To make matters worse, climate change also affects fauna and flora. Marmots and mountain goats are climbing to higher altitudes in search of cooler temperatures. Some species of pine trees are suffering from pests that previously could not survive the frost. And the residents are noticing flowers blooming early, unseasonal storms, drier summers. The pressure is not only environmental, it is also social. Many young people are leaving the villages in search of opportunities in the cities. As a result, the risk of depopulation is real. Schools are closing, churches are empty, traditions are being lost. In other words, as charming as everyday life in the Alps may seem, it depends on a delicate balance between progress, tradition, and preservation. And that balance is not always easy to maintain. Number 11. Future. Faced with so many challenges, young people leaving, nature under pressure, uncertain winters, the question remains: can alpine villages be kept alive in the 21st century? The good news is that people are trying. Technology has become an ally. With fast internet and home offices, living in the mountains is no longer synonymous with isolation. Many people are moving there, seeking a quieter life without giving up their jobs. Some villages are offering financial incentives to those who want to settle there. Local governments are renovating old houses, setting up co-working spaces, and improving schools. In Skol, for example, in the Grisons, a digital center called Mia Engiadina has become a benchmark. There, professionals work with the view of the Alps, with state-of-the-art Wi-Fi and even local coffee included. And it's not just outsiders who are arriving. Remember those young people we mentioned, who left their villages in search of education or opportunities in the cities? Well, that's right. The reverse is also happening, which gives a little more hope to these isolated villages. Many young people who grew up there and went to study in the cities are returning. With a remote job or their own business, they prefer to stay close to their families, the fresh air, and a simpler routine. In addition, some villages are betting on agritourism. Visitors spend the day with farmers, help take care of cows, and learn how to make cheese. It's extra income and cultural exchange. Others are reviving forgotten traditions, reopening museums, teaching children the local dialect or how to play the alpine horn. All to prevent the culture from dying out. Of course, it's not easy. Not every village will succeed, but what once seemed like the end of a cycle now shows signs of renewal. And who knows, in the coming winters, it may be the grandchildren of these young people who will be ringing the church bell, keeping life alive on the hillsides. So, would you live in a place like this? Would you have the courage to face a harsh winter, isolated by snow, or trade urban comforts for mountain simplicity? What surprised you most about life in these Swiss villages? Tell us in the comments. If you enjoyed this trip through the mountains, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Bello Mundo channel. Turn on the bell so you don't miss our next destinations and stories from around the world. Share this video with those who love adventure and different cultures. Thank you for joining us to the top of the Alps, and see you on our next trip.